And we're going to discuss President Bio's presidency at the United Nations Security Council, where he calls for 2 permanent seats for Africa and addresses the council on a debate around international peace and security.
Indeed, those are the issues that will form part of today's conversation here in the studios. It's time we go straight into the program, but just a gentle reminder that you can be part of the program simply by following us on our Facebook page, AYVs. Ensure you drop us your comments, questions, and contributions. Don't forget to listen to us on Radio 101.7 FM and on DSTV channel 399.
Now, straight into our first segment, the Ministry of Finance, with other stakeholders, will today commence the fiscal year 2025 bilateral budget discussions at the Ministry of Finance building in Freetown, where ministries, departments and agencies will be presenting and discuss their activity plan and budget for the year 2025 in line with the government's agenda and priorities in the National Development Plan. So this morning, to discuss the process and more, we have Kadiatu Alie, Deputy Minister of Finance 1. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
What's new with this year's fiscal year budget hearing?
Well, what is new this year? First of all, let me take this opportunity to thank you for having us, because every time you increase dialogue, especially for the public, it's a good thing. So what is new is that we're bringing all the stakeholders, like you alluded to earlier, to make sure that there's a connection between the budget from different MDAs. The linkage is there between that budget and the medium-term development plan, and also with our Big 5 agenda as a government, as a strategy. So we want to ensure that all of those are in sync, that the budget will reflect our priorities as a government, it will reflect our priorities as a nation as we try to reduce poverty, will improve on the livelihood of our people.
I deliberately asked you what's new because before now we know that performance contract, though it's not a new thing, but had been sort of like put on a pause for a while, but it was reintroduced not too long ago. And oftentimes the conversation we have on the budget is some of these MDAs get a budget for certain work. They don't complete what they're supposed to do. Of course, that factors into their performance contract, but we come again another year discussing budget for those ministries, departments and agencies. So the question on what's new, the expectation is that in line with their performance contract, what they should have done that they didn't do should factor into what they get for the budget. Absolutely.
The budget, as you know, is going to be a comprehensive review of the intention of what you plan on achieving as an MDA. So the hearing we had was at a high-level summary. So this week, starting today, actually, it's just you between me and the hearing. So after I leave here, we'll get into the details. As you know, the devil is always in the details. So we have to make sure that we hold these MDAs accountable to perform as they intend, as reflected in their budgets. It will please you to note that we do have performance evaluations and review according to the Chief Minister that we provide on a quarterly basis against our contract, against our performance contract. So those things are ongoing, and we intend to make the budget this year very robust and very accountable and reflective of our values.
Sometimes as well, it's with your ministry that doesn't, after the budget process is completed, every ministry, department and agency gets its allocation in theory. But some of the times it's your ministry that delays to send the money to their ministries, making it really difficult or nearly impossible for them to be able to succeed on their plans for the year.
So, yes, you are right that the allocations are made and they do put in requests to the ministry that is approved and sent for payment. But as you know, payment is dependent highly on revenue mobilization and also competing priorities of a state, right? So every week, as you know, the domestic revenue generation is still at a very low percentage. It's about only slightly under 9% of total GDP. So that makes the space very challenging in terms of achieving all the priorities as stated and reflected in the budget. So what we do as the ministry is that we make these payments based on the level of revenue that is generated and mobilized on a daily, on a weekly, on a monthly, and quarterly basis against the priority listed. So, for example, if we have different MDAs requesting these allocation payments, you look at it and you say, well, we only have generated this much. How do we make the best use of what we have generated? Then we look at security. Security is paramount. You all will agree with us that without security, you don't have a state, right? Then you look at priority items. You look at school feeding. You look at the health sector. You look at feed salon. So these are all competing priorities against the internally generated revenues. It is also worth noting that since 2024, January to now, we have received no external support from donors to the budget. So what we have been operating on is purely what is generated domestically. So that creates a really challenge for us. But having said that, we intend to make do to enable these MDAs to go on and perform again against the backdrop of the revenues that is collected and against the priorities that are competing.
What seems very clear, Madam Minister, is the fact that today's discussion, the discussion that will commence today, aims to better improve the living conditions, living standards of Sahelians. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
But again, how much will this foster economic growth? How much will this conversation foster economic growth?
Well, it will in a lot of areas. If you look at the big five, right? These are specific targeted areas where it will enable improvement in certain sectors to reflect improvement in the economy, right? If you look at, as an example, feed salon, right? Feed salon, what does that mean? As it reflects in the budget, it means that we want to create a nation that is food secure, that we grow what we eat what we grow. What does that mean? That means additional investment in the agricultural sector. What does that also mean? That also means that opportunities for employment, for youth, for women to participate in that sector. What does it also mean? It means that you are less reliant on importing basic essential commodities, right? What does that mean? That also means that you're reliant on foreign exchange, on importing will be reduced, right? So all of these triggers will reflect in an improved economy.
Quick salon, you know, is not a quick fix. The president himself has alluded to the fact that it will take time for us to see the realization of this initiative that his government is now driven. But again, what then are the modalities to cushion the current economic crisis that the people are affected?
Well, it's going to be, you're right, that it's going to be a journey. But we are on that journey, we're on the path, and we are focused, we are laser focused in achieving that objective. So every year it becomes a little better, right? So every year the goal is that we reduce imports by 20% across the board for essential commodities, whether it's rice, whether it's onions. So that's the objective. So as we get closer to, because the whole objective is that by 2030, Sierra Leone will be food secure, right? So that's a long journey, but we're here today. And every year we're chopping at it. We're making that progress a little bit easier.
One of the key concerns that we've had over times for ministers within the Ministry of Finance is that of ineligible expenditures by some government ministries, departments, and agencies. Will it form part of the conversation during this budget discussion process?
Absolutely. And that is why we will dig deeper into the budget conversations. We will not stay at the highest level. Right now, this week, we will start digging into the details. And what is also different is that we are engaging the ministers to be more hands-on, to be a little bit more involved in the budgetary process so that they fully understand that the budget they are approving reflects the objective and goals of their individual MDAs.
Kadiatu, as you go through the process itself, it leaves me with a curious a thought. You earlier put out the challenges, the competition for resources that are very limited. Mm-hmm. When you're issuing out the budget allocation to MDAs, what does the ministry use as a benchmark to determine the priority areas? Because everything, as you put it, you can't say security is more important than health or education. Everything is competing. But how do you make that decision that some of these MDAs get their budget allocation on time and some don't? What do you use to decide?
So in the budgetary process, one of the things I think we have to do, and which we're working at is to increase revenue mobilization, right? Through automation, because what happens is the bigger the revenue is, then the easier it will be to satisfy all the MDAs, all the competing interests. So we have, as a government, we've invested in technology.
Now, we'll look at the revenue generation at some point, but let's the existing structure you have. Mm-hmm. How do you determine which of the MDAs gets its allocation on time and which one you would say you'd have to pause as we get more money, we allocate?
Yeah, so it depends like on the competing priorities at the moment, right? So it is not a stagnant calculation on who gets, who doesn't get. It falls within, because there are certain priorities that are time-bound. For agriculture, for example, if you don't make certain investments at a particular time, then you miss the boat for the whole next year. So these are, it's not a, I cannot tell you, madam, that it is every time agriculture comes, they get it. No, that is not. It is within a broader perspective and within the time frame that we're dealing with. So these are fluid discussions. These are fluid decision making that goes on a daily basis. I can tell you that the Honorable Minister Sheku Fantamadi Bangura and myself and the entire leadership, we meet on a daily basis to look at the state of the Treasury. We look at the priorities that are facing us on that day, and we take these hard decisions on a daily basis.
So now let's look at how, as a nation, we generate the money to feed into the budget of the running affairs of the government.
So we're not unique. We're like any other nation. We generate our revenue domestically. We generate revenue through grants and subsidies that are given to us as a state. Those areas of revenue generation, they include taxes that employees pay, they include goods and services. When you go purchase something and there's a tax to that, so a wide variety of tax collection goes into the revenue that is generated. So what we are doing, I indicated earlier that we're trying to increase that revenue mobilization through automation, through technology, because like the Honorable Minister Fantamadi likes to say, we want to get people's hands off the government's money. So that's the whole, the less people are involved in touching and filling the money, better we are as a state in terms of effectively and efficiently collecting those revenues. But also what we have done in certain areas is to make sure that we use technology to help us determine the tax base. For example, we started doing fuel marking so that we know if fuel is being smuggled into the country, thereby avoiding some of those taxes that are levied on there. So now we can, as the fuel comes in that is legitimate, there is a marking process that determines now if you go to any of the fuel stations, you can tell by looking at the fuel that this came through and has paid the right taxes, right? We've started collecting or enhancing taxes on excise. If you look at most drinks now, there is a stamp on it that tells us that it has paid the necessary taxation. So these are some of the areas collectively that's going to make this difference for us in terms of increasing the revenue that comes into the state.
Let's talk on policy coherence. How will it help to erode away the bottlenecks that the process used to face over time?
Yeah, I think that is very critical, and it starts with engagement, involvement, having everybody own the process. That is why we're involving all the MDAs so that it does not become a Ministry of Finance budget. It becomes their budget. They own it, they understand it, and it all builds up into this medium-term development, national development strategy. It builds into the Big Five. It builds into the objective of the government, the priorities of the state. So it is a buying process. It's going to be engagement like we're doing now. It's going to be ownership, everybody actually feeling a sense of ownership to deliver on the budget. So that's what we're doing, and we'll continue to do that.
I think Fabian has asked a question that touches on you can't give what you don't have. And you've alluded to that fact already, that the country has a very tight budget to feed all other sectors. Say for agriculture that you mentioned earlier on, government has made commitments to adhere to the Maputo protocols, which touches on about 10% of its national budget to be allocated to agriculture. Where are they in terms of those allocations? We're in the third quarter. Where are they in terms of those allocations?
I cannot tell you on top of my head where exactly what the number is right now, but I can get back to you guys on those specific numbers. But it is obvious that we are investing. We continue to invest in the agricultural sector, and we as a nation, we will make good on every protocol that we're a part of. This is the intention. Again, there are priorities. There are challenges. All is not lost, right? We continue to work hard. We've engaged external partners in the different sectors. There is the MCC that came through for the energy sector, the Vienna Roundtable that also touched on agriculture and energy. So those are resources that will all be used to mobilize and deliver on these protocols.
Madam Minister, one of the most brilliant of initiative that many people before this time do commend is having a single treasury accounts wherein every other revenue perhaps will flow through. Has it yielded a required dividend for Sierra Leone?
It has, because that consolidates treasury. So like I said earlier, that every day we sit at the ministry at the highest levels to review the treasury, the state of the treasury, all the ins and all the outs. So in terms of that coordination, in terms of having a singular focus where the revenues are, it's easier and it creates ownership. It creates this unity within the government, if you would, that people are not in silos, operating in silos. We are in it together. We pool our resources, and then we use those resources on priority areas as determined, and then hopefully we'll have enough for everybody, all the MDAs, to make use of their allocations and to follow all their priority areas.
That helps us as a nation to perhaps tighten the knob on maybe leakages here and there, but it still leaves us open in the arena for wastages. What does the ministry have, perhaps as a policy or as a solution going forward? Because some of these wastages, of course, are at the MDAs. Wasteful spending, things they could have saved money on, but they don't, because it's not coming off of their pockets. It's coming off of taxpayers' money, so they just spend it anyhow they wouldn't if it were their money. In the area of wastages, how are you saving the country's resources?
Well, we are looking at a holistic area. For example, we're looking at reducing the usage of paper, trying to go a little bit paperless in certain areas. So that's an area. So when you say wastage, you know, a lot of times they print stuff, 100 pages of something, and then realize, oops, there was a mistake in that. They go again and reprint it. So these are the wastages that we're trying to tighten and hold people, because as you reduce, as you automate, right, a lot of these areas, then you reduce some of those unnecessary spending, you reduce some of the areas that are duplications, you reduce some of the areas that are pure wastage in the system, right? And also creating everybody with all the knowledge, the linkages, right? Then we can have a more coordinated approach that activities that one MDA is doing that touches upon another MDA, we don't need to duplicate those resources. We can now decide, okay, this is still going to the intended purpose and it's been taken care of under this MDA, so therefore we don't need to replicate in this other MDA. So
perhaps it's lack of knowledge. We may try to judge them, but I'm curious. Some of these MDAs, they use official vehicles, which is of course fueled by taxpayers' money, to run personal errands, like those who would get their drivers, pick up their kids, take them to school, pick them up from school, run other personal errands. Are we misunderstanding, or is that part of why they have taxpayers' vehicles and money fueling those vehicles, or is that also considered part of the wastages?
I cannot speak to specific personal knowledge in terms of how MDAs are utilizing official vehicles.
Are those vehicles for personal errands or official errands?
Say that again,
Are
sir.
those vehicles for personal errands or official errands?
No, it's obvious, madam, that they are official vehicles, and the intent is for them to be used as official vehicles to run official business, to run the affairs of the state. So that is the intent. Now, I cannot sit here and tell you that I know people who use it. That is not within my purview.
You may not need to know, but you perhaps wouldn't know, but there are people who know. It leaves us with who monitors the MDAs in the disbursement of their budget money. Who monitors them? Once you've given them their money as per the budget allocation, whose responsibility is it to monitor them in the expenditure? Well,
it comes back to, I earlier said that we have a performance contract. They are very specific in terms of deliverables. So they are accountable to the government, they are accountable to the Chief Minister's office. So we come back every quarter and say, you said you were going to deliver AYV, whatever that is, all the list of things that you have on your list. And we hold you accountable to see how have you delivered what you said you would deliver. And the resources were not an issue, so yeah.
Over time, we've seen the establishment of new ministries.
New ministries.
Some departments and agencies. Will it have an effect in the budget allocation? Will that lead to an increase or decrease in the budgetary allocation to, say, ministries, departments, and agencies?
Well, in the budget process, we try to hold the priorities of the state paramount. So therefore, establishments of new MDAs will not compromise the delivery on the vision or the priorities of the state, right? So it becomes, again, reallocating, the driver becomes the priority of the state, right? So if something new comes up, and a new MDA that is in line, in line with the priorities, and it becomes within the time frame, it becomes a priority that needs attention, that will be supported and given the necessary resources. And then the rest of the pool, again, goes to, like, the way we get out of this, really, is to increase the revenue pool. And that, to me, has a total focus at the ministry, so that, because MDAs are not just established out of thin air. They're established based on necessity, based on analysis that says this is needed for our people, this is needed to grow the economy, this is needed in line with our development goals. So that's why these MDAs come up, and therefore should be funded based on the allocations and the necessary resources that is within the state.
Madam Minister, there is